Welcome to Every Trait, the Pro Biopunk Philosophy channel. You may call me ZJ for now, and we're in Phase 1, Biology and Pop Culture. Why ElderScrolls? Well, it's a setting I already know, and there's just enough genetic tomfoolery in it with the hist and everything to justify it on this channel. Also, a tier list is literally the easiest thing you can do for your first video, so here we are. This is going to be very different than other tier lists you've seen for ElderScrolls because this is about who's most likely to still be around 100,000 years from now. So it's probably going to be in a different order than you used to see. We've got everything from endangered to extinction proof, which is nothing's really extinction proof, but you know. Our first metric is problem solving. Get points here by being good at solving problems yourself or good at working with others. Our second metric is magic or tech level. This is important because there are other nations with magic and tech, and you can use magic and tech to hand wave away certain extinction events. And I mean, to put it bluntly, if you've got an army 1,000 strong with axes banging against shields, longbows, they're all getting ready to raid a little fort that you grossly outnumber, and a stealth bomber a mile above you drops a bomb on you, you're done. So there are magic gaps that big between nations if we're using magic as technology as an example. So the third metric is genetics, which we're going to be using real things that wildlife ecologists and population geneticists use, as well as we can guesstimate it from the games. So for this, we have the IC score as the first part of it. Doesn't mean what the I there stands for is literally happening. It just means that over time, similar effects will begin to build up in the population, such as weakness to disease and many other ailments. The diversity score is not a political thing. It's a logistical thing. How do I explain? Imagine a roulette table, right? In a real roulette table, if you bet on just one number versus betting on like all odds, you get a way higher payout if you bet on just one number. But not in the game of survival. Betting on all odds, you get the same payout, survival. So why would you bet on just one number, right? The wheel is determining the next extinction event. Each number is a different genome, or a combination of them, or whatever. So you make as many guesses as what the next extinction event is going to be. Each genome is a guess of what might be needed, basically. So that's why you need every trait. So, yeah, only an idiot in that case would bet on only one number. This is common wisdom in most aspects of life. You diversify your portfolio. You don't put all your eggs in one basket. When it comes to biology, people get confused. And I think it's because farming and ranching, agriculture, they do bet on just one number. Why? Well, the farmer doesn't care if corn is going to go extinct 100,000 years from now. That's not what they're managing it for. They're managing it for maximum yield over the next few years. That is a very different metric. So of course you're not going to use the same systems. If someone's managing your species like agriculture, they're probably planning on eating you. So yeah, bad. Our fourth metric is the special metric. It's because the setting has a lot of weird stuff in it, and we have to account for that somehow. There's a lot of really weird stuff, weird cultural stuff, weird magical stuff, and that drastically affects survival chances. So of course that's got to be included. Now without further ado, let's begin the actual tier list. We only have one in the endangered species list, which these aren't really species per se, but you know. So our F tier is, say it with me, you probably already know what it is, it's orcs. Orcs are the ultimate underdogs in Elder Scrolls. I've played as them, I like underdogs, what can I say? But yeah, they score low in all three categories. They don't have a special category, they don't need one to get into F tier. So, problem solving, not unless you can hit it with a stick. How many times has their nation collapsed? I mean, seriously. Magic or tech level, active disdain for any form of intellectualism. Their magic tech level is negatives. It's in the negatives, okay? Genetics, they have the worst IC score in the setting because of their strongholds. Now remember, in Elder Scrolls, everything's space compressed. A city that's supposed to have 10,000 people has like maybe 24 people that are named, not counting like guards, right? So we have to assume the strongholds are meant to be bigger too. So what is it, 1 out of every 10 men reproducing, maybe 1 out of every 50, because only one does in each stronghold. And that drastically increases, or makes the IC score worse, right? So even if they're trading children with neighboring strongholds, you're still reproducing with your second cousin at most distant. So yeah, that's a problem. They age faster than other elves, a lot faster. They do choose to die around age 60, so they're not a burden, but they could live as long as a human. My headcanon for why they live shorter lives is because of their bad IC score. I know that's not what the writers intended, but that's how I'm thinking of it. So yeah, with abysmal scores in all three categories, orcs get F tier. Now there's two in D tier, and their scores are really close together, so they're kind of arbitrary. But first we'll talk about wood elves. If you're surprised that survivalists are in D tier, sorry, if you're not surprised, you already know what I'm about to say. Green Pact. So the Green Pact means they can only eat meat. They can't eat plants. So let me explain. Each trophic level has about 10% the energy of the previous one. So the trophic level 1, that's plants. 2, that's animals eat the plants. 3, that's animals eat animals. So we have the first trophic level and the second trophic level. So about 110%. We can say 100% because that 10% does come from the, yeah, whatever, 100%. Wood elves have 10%. So they have 1/10 the amount of food to begin with. This means they could go extinct from a microfamine. A microfamine is when only one food source is unavailable. It can be bad. I mean, look up the potato famine. Like, it can be bad. So this happens to them. What are they going to do? They're going to have to double, triple, quadruple down on their other food sources. They're probably going to even have to like use their nature magic to like lure all the insects to eat them. What happens to an ecology when most of the insects die, by the way? Total ecological collapse. The Green Pact could cause the death of the Valenwood. Oops. And some Wood Elf fans are probably saying, well, what about the Wild Hunt? I bet you don't know about the Wild Hunt. Yeah, I know about the Wild Hunt. It kills everything in the area, including Wood Elves. If your special trick is to nuke yourself, that's not going to get you points on a survival list. It might get you points on a power list, but that's not what this is. Next in D tier, this one will surprise you. High Elves. High Elves have one of the worst genetic scores in the setting. They practice, this is my first video, should I say it? We'll call it FE. They practice FE. Why is FE bad? We already went over that. It's betting on only one number on the roulette table. It's stupid. It's managing your species like agriculture instead of like wildlife that you're trying to get it to survive. What makes it even worse for high elves is that they have a long generation span, so they're getting new mutations at a slower rate than everyone else and actively selecting out traits they don't like, which results in drastically decreased diversity, which means the wrong number comes up on that roulette wheel, they all die. With something that bad going on, why aren't they F tier? Because they have the highest text score in the setting. So they can just hand wave away certain extinction events, which keeps them out of F tier. If it wasn't for that, they would be in F tier. Thinking that that's a smart thing to do to your own species, that shows that they lack problem solving as well. So, I mean, to show you how bad it would be, if this was practiced on Earth across the whole planet, and we simulated 1 million different timelines, different nations rising and falling, all that, humanity would go extinct in 1 million of 1 million iterations. Decreasing the total amount of traits a species has is bad. Going back to the roulette wheel, one of those numbers might represent sickle cell anemia, which can provide protection from malaria. So it's a bad trait, but it's good if that number happens to come up on the roulette wheel. So, you know, FE, generally one of the worst things you can do for long-term survival. But isn't this a pro-biopwn channel? Yeah. But not FE specifically. Other forms of use of biotechnology, including increasing the number of traits a species has. But that's a little too controversial for this one, so we'll keep moving on. In C tier, we have 3. It's the largest category. And again, the scores are all really close together, so it's kind of arbitrary, the order. We'll start out C tier with Nords. Nords have also active disdain for intellectualism like orcs, less severe. If I recall, in Skyrim, the ones that were more friendly to that were the ones more friendly to the Empire. So, you know, and they used to use magic a lot. In fact, one of their own that basically became a god, I mean, he used to have war machines and stuff. But they turned against that at some point. probably because it's an elf thing and they wanted to distance themselves from everything elfy. And undoubtedly, the High Elves were very glad they did because it made them weaker. May have even helped, encourage it over centuries to make them weaker. But yeah, so their lack of intellectualism makes them not great at problem solving, and so on and so forth. Next, we have the Red Guards. So Red Guards also have disdain for magic, but not so much for other forms of intellectualism. So why are they so close to Nords? Because through no fault of their own, their land is the most resource scarce, which does put them at a disadvantage. And next we have the Dunmer, who would have scored higher in earlier eras. Their magic with the Telvanni becoming less powerful and everything, their magic research has dropped. They also are somewhat limited in problem solving in that they are perhaps the least self-sufficient nation. They use their dead for things. They engage in, shall we say, unpaid prisoners with jobs who never committed a crime, right? They've engaged in that more than anyone else. These are people who can't clean their own dishes or do their own laundry, okay? If it wasn't for the Ashlanders, they wouldn't be in C tier, especially with their magic score not being as good as it was in earlier eras. Though it might bounce back. Now, Dunmer actually have a worse IC score than average, just a little bit, because they have the houses plus social hierarchy. So this creates both a vertical and a horizontal grid for breeding. Now, I didn't take off many points for this because I'm sure those lines are very fuzzy. I'm sure they go outside of that a lot, but it's worth mentioning. Now, for B tier, we have only one representative, Argonians. Argonians are the second most diverse of all races in ElderScrolls. This hyperdiversity comes from the Hist, which mutates them, evolves them. And each Hist makes different decisions, which is why you have some Argonians that look more aquatic and some that look more like arid land and so on. So they have so many different spine patterns and things. And this isn't ideal hyperdiversity because you do still have central forces controlling it. At least it's, I don't even know what to call this. Is it FE? I don't know, because it's increasing the number of traits the species has. But it is doing it from a central authority. Although there's more than one central authority and they make different decisions. So it's kind of confusing, right? If it was individuals choosing whether to mod or not, and that would be real hyperdiversity. But why are they in B tier if they're so hyperdiverse and fairly decent at problem solving, given how they handle the Oblivion Crisis? Well, they could die from a tree plague. No other nation would. Wood Elves would be very sad from a tree plague, but only Argonians would actually go extinct. They need the Hist. They need it. And without them, the Hist would likely die too. The Hist survived in the past, but now there's nations everywhere on the continent, and the Hist can defend themselves a little bit, but with a whole army attacking, no, they cannot. So, yeah. Because they could die from something that doesn't even affect reptiles, if they even really count as reptiles anymore. I mean, I'm not sure an actual reptilian race would have been swimming in the frigid waters of Skyrim, right? So they must be at least partially warm-blooded. But anyway, they could die from something that doesn't even hurt reptiles. And that's a big flaw, counterbalanced by their hyperdiversity. So, anyway. Their diversity is so great, all people on Earth combined is probably the equivalent of betting on all odds on that table. Argonians are betting on all the numbers. So that does help, but they could die from a tree plague, so gotta put them down to B tier. For A tier, we're gonna start with the Imperials. Through the power of sheer banality, they get into A tier. They're not natural at magic, though they do some research in it, though not as much as they used to. They have access to the Elder Scrolls, and they don't ever seem to use them. They are pretty diverse. They're the result of Nords and Needs interbreeding, so even though they don't look it, they don't look diverse, but there's probably something there. Nothing adding to their IC score other than just social hierarchy, and they're really good at working with others. They are the joiners, the alliance makers, the so yeah, they're kind of boring. The only people excited to play them are people who are excited about anything Roman themed. Otherwise, no one's excited to play an Imperial. But being boring can be good when it comes to survival. So they don't have any major weird things that are likely to make them go extinct. Now for our final two, I'm going to tell you about them both before I tell you which one's in S tier. I decided I was only going to put one in S tier. So I'm going to tell you about them both and then tell you what the winner is to keep some suspense. So we've got the Khajiit and the Bretons. Why the Bretons? Well, kind of like Imperials, but magic does come a little more naturally to them, and they do a lot of intellectual research of all different kinds. Very little's off the table. So their tech score is second only to the High Elves. It would have perhaps been below the Dunmer, except for recent events. So problem solving is a little limited because of their constant backstabbing of each other. But other than that, it's pretty high. It's decent because in addition to the intellectualism and the magic and the tech, they have druidism as well as part of their culture. So they basically have the survivalism of the Wood Elves and the tech of the High Elves. Not to the same degree as the High Elves, but and then their genetic score, humans and elves interbreeding. And let's talk about Khajiit now. Khajiit have the highest genetic score in the setting. We know they're hyperdiverse because of all the different code patterns. This is not to be contested. We also know that they have probably the best IC score because while they do have social hierarchy, they don't really adhere to it. So why are they so high on the list though? Well, their hyperdiversity is compounded by the fact that one genome can take many different forms. One Khajiit genome can be any of these forms. And what this does is it creates a situation where they're almost impossible to drive extinct. Imagine something happens that wipes out everything with fur. Well, there's a breed of Khajiit that doesn't have that. All the other breeds come back in the very next generation because they can all come from any genome. Something happens that wipes out all large animals. Okay, the Khajiit breeds that are more than 400 pounds all die out. What happens the next generation? They all come back. Something wipes out all small things, like house cat size. Those ones go extinct. Next generation, what happens? They come back. Something wipes out everything that walks on two legs. Some Khajiit don't. So the next generation, all the two legs come back. You trying to get the picture? How would you drive them extinct? Only two ways. Disease, because they probably all have similar immune complexes and such. Okay, but they've already been through that. Natural selection dictates that only the ones with the strongest immune system survived. So that ship might have sailed. Not completely, but the other way to drive them extinct would be to wipe out all mammalian life on the continent, which would also wipe out 8 of the other nations. When I first read that Azura chose the Khajiit to be the ones to guard the lunar lattice, I was like, is Azura an idiot? And then I realized, no, Azura's a genius. You don't need a clever or capable people to guard the lunar lattice. You need a people that will always be there. That's what matters. So magic does come naturally to them. They do get some points there. To the smaller breeds, it comes naturally. And when it comes to problem solving, mostly because they're good at working with others. These days, they didn't used to be. Back in the day, they were terrible at that. But we're talking about modern era, right? So they got some points there. So it's close because Breton scored decently in all 3 categories, so they didn't cap out any of the 3 categories. They scored decently high. Khajiit, however, have a special category worth 100 points. The maximum number of points a category can be worth, added on top of the other 3 categories. So, who wins? Well, they were basically tied. Even with the Khajiit getting 100 points more, because of their special category, they lost enough points in problem solving and magic that it basically ties. But I had to put one in S tier, so it's Khajiit. Khajiit are extinction proof. Well, not really, but as close to it as you can get. One genome being able to take all those different forms, that is crazy. And it's really insurmountable. So before we leave, let's ask one final question. See if you've been paying attention. Is sentient life more likely to survive on Nirn or on Earth? Nirn has way more extinction level events. This is true. So the answer is Nirn. Like I said, human diversity is like betting on all the numbers. Or betting on only the odd numbers, basically. That's how much of the board we fill out, which is a lot, don't get me wrong. But there are individual species in ElderScrolls that fill out the whole board, that just completely outdo us in terms of diversity. And that's just individual ones. When you combine all 10 of them, they're not just betting on all the numbers, they're betting on all the letters, they're betting on all the wingdings. In case the ball bounces off the wheel and onto another wheel, you know, they're betting on everything. So, yeah, sentient life is actually more likely to survive on a world like Nirn than on Earth. Anyway, food for thought. Thank you for listening. I have been ZJ, and remember, always Gmod responsibly. Clicky, 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 clicky. So first, this is probably the only ElderScrolls video I'm going to do. So if you have mixed parentage in ElderScrolls, you look like the mother. So if there's an elf and a human, if the elf's a mother, you look like an elf. If the human's the mother, you look like the human. How does this make any sense? Well, it makes sense if all of the racial traits are on the X chromosome only. But wouldn't a woman still look like a hybrid then? Not so fast. In a woman's cell, only one X is active at a time. It's a different one in different cells, and it's kind of random. But what if on Nirn it's not? What if the X they get from their father is always deactivated? The boys, of course, would only have the X from their mother already. And this would explain it. If all the things that make a Dunmer different from a Breton is all just on the X chromosome, then it actually makes sense. Now, the real reason is because they didn't want to add all those different character models to the games. But, you know. Anyway,